I don't always drink peach whiskey, but when I do, I drink it with the most capable man on the planet. Cory Bergeron comes loaded with credentials. He's known for grossing over hundreds of millions of dollars on national television, both on his own and with Kevin Harrington, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank. Cory is a best-selling author and a highly pursued keynote speaker because inside all of that success is a real, authentic human who's earned his stripes as a resourceful entrepreneur. From a global pandemic destroying a mountain of momentum and successful business to how massive health challenges in their family challenged Cory and his wife Elizabeth to completely refocus. They sold everything to save the life of their son, and in doing so may have found the cure for anxiety. Now, that statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. You're absolutely going to love this podcast because it's rich with perseverance, passion, and perfectly aligned priorities. Please reach out to us. We always want to hear your good news because, frankly, we all need more of that right now. And now the wild stories of Cory Bergeron are coming right up. And in that, we're going to take you to Montana, where there's a wild and adventurous real estate opportunity brewing right now. So buckle up.
I've been wanting to get you on this podcast for a long time because you are a very special and unique human being who,
thank you.
Not only are you incredibly productive, you have a very powerful business mind, but it's very rare to find people that have that and the level of passion that you have. Not just for your family, but for the people you serve. You're definitely a servant leader, and you're an extremely successful businessman. And it would be just a crying shame to not share your story with people.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate you asking. It's been quite a journey, and what's really interesting about my journey is although I've always been extremely driven, I don't feel like I've ever done anything I didn't want to do. You know, it's not like I had that. Now wait, that's not true. That's not true. I want to be perfectly accurate here. Okay?
Well, now I have to know what it is.
When I was 15 years old, I spent 6 months as a janitor in a nursing home.
There we go.
Okay, now
let's talk about that a little bit.
All right, so all of my friends were making minimum wage at that time. You know, it was $3.25 an hour in rural Pennsylvania in the in late 80s, and I had a buddy of mine whose mother ran the kitchen in a nursing home, and she put in a good word for me. And yes, I could tell the stories all day long about how I was riding my bike in the middle of winter and it was 20 below and all that stuff. Sound like, you know, your grandpa uphill both ways to school and that kind of thing. But the simple fact of the matter is, regardless of how hard it was for me to get to the nursing home, once I was there, I was working indoors, which not all of my friends could say, during the winter, and I was making $7.20 an hour. Now, when, you know, they had a PA system, and the PA system would go off and they'd say, there's a code green on, you know, in room 305 on the 3rd floor, code green. Well, code green meant somebody had something come out of their body and it was all over the floor, and that was my cue to come clean it up.
You were the code green guy.
I was the code green guy.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. So,
Talk about building character.
It did. It built a lot of character.
Was the person in the room while you were cleaning it up?
Yeah, probably. I would say about half the time.
So they had to watch you clean it up too. Was there conversation that happened during that time? Like, oh man, I'm sorry.
You know, what's really amazing is, and it's amazing and it's sad. So I ended up getting close to a number of the people who were residents there.
That doesn't surprise me.
And I would buy them birthday presents and I'd spend time with them. You know, people who...
doesn't surprise me.
They hadn't, some of those people hadn't had family come visit them it's like they were forgotten, you know? Yeah. And you look around some of their rooms and it's so stark, like there's no decoration, there's no love around them. And so I wanted to be that light in their day, and I would do things for them. So some people I would have conversations with, I'd gotten very friendly with. Other people, very sad, you know, they weren't able to have conversations because they'd kind of hit that point where they couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't anymore. And you know, it was very sad. They were, a lot of times that I had a code green, it was because it was one of those rooms, because they hadn't, you know, they lost control of their bodily functions. They couldn't do what they wanted to do anymore, or they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
It was very sad. So there, you know, was when I say I've never done anything I didn't want to do, that is never going to be completely accurate. Yeah. That's a good example of that, you know.
But you were doing even though you were doing something you may not have wanted to do, you were doing something that you were naturally inclined to do, because in addition to cleaning up the mess, which was your job, you were building relationships with people there.
That's true.
So let me ask you, what was it that drove the compassion in you at that young age to want to connect with those people? What grew that compassion in you at a young age?
You know, I think it would have to be the, I heard somebody say one time that your brain is this hard drive that basically records between the age of 3 and 7 the way you are going to feel about everything around you for the rest of your life.
Really?
Yeah, that basically you decide between the age of 3 to 7 how you are going to interpret your world, how the world affects you, how you handle your emotions, how you interact with that world. Like, you just decide how you're going to feel about everything, which is why you can go to any mall and sit down and just watch people come and go, and you see a bunch of 7-year-olds in 50-year-old bodies still trying to figure out how to manage themselves.
Right.
That's all we are, you know. I mean, really, I look at myself and I'm saying, okay, I can point back to a time in my life between age 3 and 7 that directly corresponds to the way I'm feeling about this right now. During the age of 3 and 7, I was raised entirely by my mother. When I wrote my book, I dedicated it to my mother. There's no monument I could build high enough to my mother. She is, the best way I can put it is, if you're a person of faith, then she is the closest thing to Jesus I've ever met in my life. So compassionate, so giving, so servant-oriented, so intent on listening to others and lifting them up and wanting to help them. And you know, people have described my mother as just being around her as a place of healing for everybody, you know. Well, you know, my mother and father were divorced when I was 2, and my dad worked in hospitality, and he had an offer to go work at this huge resort here in Florida, and my mother was living in Pennsylvania at the time, and he decided he was going to take that job at that resort, and he moved to Florida. And I got to see my dad, but I only saw him a couple times a year. I would fly down and see him. And in the meantime, I was raised by my mom until she remarried when I was 7 years old. Okay. So that gap of time between age 2 and age 7, I lived under the direct daily influence of my mother. And I think that had a lot to do with the compassion that is in me and the empathy that I have for others.
It definitely carries over, because, I mean, I've only known you for less than a year now. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like you were one of those people I could open up to. You're one of those people that I felt like really cares, you know. Some people, I feel like they truly do care, right? Mm-hmm. And some people I feel like, are they fooling me into thinking they care? And there's just a little bit of uncertainty because their motives are still unclear to me, but yet it feels good. Mm-hmm. And then there are certain people that are obviously just not, you know, fit to be around.
Yeah.
But with you, I felt pretty phenomenal. Like, Even in the very beginning, the first time I met you, I was on a phone call. I was on a layover in the Houston airport, and Maureen had just kind of recommended me for BA.
Yep.
And we were trying to schedule a call, and I'm like, well, hey, I'm kind of on this long layover. Can we just chat now? And you were digging for compassion. You were digging for people that are giving, which is the nature of the mastermind that we're in, that you are the chief cook and bottle washer. I mean, you and I've even seen your position grow here, and it seems like you, not only do you do a phenomenal job, you really seem to come alive around the people, and you seem to care, and that's just super rare. I don't think it would run really well without you. This is me being a first-time member. This has been going on for years, and I know, how long have you been what is your title?
So officially, I am the Chief Experience Officer of the company, which means that although I do dabble a little bit in front of house when it comes to systems and processes, because I'm a pretty solid operator, most of what I do for the company is membership fulfillment and the entire member experience. So once somebody decides to become a member, they're handed off to me, and I ensure that the entire, their experience with the mastermind from there on out, we're hitting absolutely every point we need to hit for that person. And we're continuing to evolve that experience ongoing so that we're always providing something better for our members. I don't ever want to stop evolving. I don't want to ever feel like I've got the formula and it's working, because for me, it's not about the bottom line. For me, it is about the impact that I'm able to have. And I know that, I can affect 150 people, and that's about how many people are in our membership right now. I can affect 150 people directly, or I can affect 150 thought leaders, 150 people who are running businesses that employ dozens or even hundreds of others. Just by affecting 150 really driven, passionate, motivated visionaries, I know that I can impact millions beyond that just through the 150 I have access to. So that is part of my drive and part of what gives me passion for what I do, which is why I really enjoy being in charge of fulfilling that entire member experience.
The first time that I was here, I'm very introverted, and I don't know why. I just am. It takes me a while to warm up to people. Your wife was one of the first people that kind of just sat next to me at the bar. I'm sitting there just trying to have a little drink. I didn't realize the importance of going out to dinner with people. Yeah. Like if you ask me in any setting if I want to kind of go out to dinner, I'll be like, nah, not really. No. And so I didn't. My first quarter here, I didn't go out to dinner with anybody. We actually rented a room off site because I didn't know what to expect. Yeah. And so here I am doing my best to kind of get to know people a little bit. Conversations like that in a non-controlled environment are usually very exhaustive for me, just because I'm always looking for nuggets. I'm always looking for the interesting things, and a lot of people don't really go for that. They just want to talk about sports. I
totally get that about you. It's one of the things I love about you.
Well, your wife seemed to too, because we talked for like an hour. Yeah. And just so you know, she talked about you most of the time, and your children.
I have to thank her for
and
that.
The fun things that you do, and she's so passionately in love with you.
She is a bright light.
And the way you have structured everything that you've done here at BA and all of the things that you've achieved in your life, I learned those from Elizabeth because she is so passionate about you.
She is my biggest cheerleader.
Which is why I really connected with her, because I've got a very similar relationship with my wife and my children. And so we just talked about our spouses and our children the whole time.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was really cool, and she made me feel very comfortable. And then once I got here and kind of learned the lay of the land, I realized that I needed to begin to open up and give people a chance, ask more questions. There really is no pressure here. The pressure is I had made it up. Yeah. And because of the expectations of the caliber of people that are in this room, and definitely took me a while to kind of realize where my place is, inside the room. And it's been a really fun journey. I haven't say I've figured it out, but I'm starting to figure it out.
Well, we're all on a journey. We're all figuring everything out along the way. Nobody's got anything figured out ever. I surround myself with 150 people that others look to as thought leaders. Tell me what to think. Tell me what to feel. Tell me how to act. Tell me, they look to others to feed them. And what's really funny is those other people, they've extracted some nuggets of wisdom throughout their lives, but nobody's got it all figured out. They don't either. Tony Robbins doesn't have it figured out either. It just, but he has learned how to speak in such a way to inspire others, where he can ask the right questions so that you can figure out what's right for you. Yeah. And that's the most powerful form of mentorship. So
no doubt about it. I mean, I'm more comfortable in a room with a mission. Yeah. Right? So I'm with an ensemble of people that want the same goal, and then we can literally accomplish anything. That's where I come alive in those moments. Yeah. So definitely being stretched in this environment. Yeah. And so thank you for creating an environment of comfort and of learning, education. It's really powerful. And also getting to know you and Elizabeth in some of these settings, I've gotten a taste of what some of the unrequited loves are in your life, and the things that you want to just go out and annihilate. And I want to talk about some of those things, but I think they'll be more impactful to the audience if we find out a little bit more about you. And
I apologize. I just got ice in my mouth, and I'm chewing it, and it's crunching, and I'm so cognizant of the fact that I have a microphone about 3 inches under my mouth. I can see that, it's probably coming through like I'm, eating a mouthful of rocks.
I hope it does. But here's the thing, because that'll wake people up if they're driving or something. So, but here's the thing: most people don't, and I'm glad that you do, because I've done podcasts where people are banging the table with their, fist, and usually, like, we had to change our microphone setups because we had it like these little podium mics, and they were sitting here, and then it was like, if you go back and listen,
thump. Yes, I get it.
So you're very conscious of that because of your background in being on camera. So talk about that. Quite a prestigious career in front of the camera in the infomercial world.
I did, and it's interesting because, as I said, I feel as though I never really did anything that I didn't want to do. I've always been an extremely driven person. I always found a way to somehow make money for myself in a way that stretched me and made me think bigger and expanded my mind and I sought out people who knew more than I did, and I relied on their mentorship and their insight. And what you're talking about, my on-air career, was no different. So I graduated from college with a degree in broadcast productions and programming. When I graduated from college, my girlfriend, who you have met, my wife Elizabeth, at the time, this is 24 years ago, was... She and I have been going out for about a year. Now, I was planning on hiking the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. It had been a goal.
Oh my gosh, I want to do that.
It had been a goal for so much of my life.
Yes.
I mean, I've been an outdoorsman. I've been a backpacker and a camper, a long-distance hiker for a long time. My parents used to laugh because when I was 13 and 14 years old, people would call the house looking for me, and they'd say, "I know it doesn't sound very, motherly or fatherly, but we haven't seen our son in 4 days." And it's because I was with a backpack up in the mountains,
Total Gen Xer.
Oh, man. Yeah, right. Exactly. Didn't spend a lot of time around the Nintendo or the Atari. It was more like I was up in the woods.
Wholly unsupervised.
So it had been a goal of mine for a long time to do that 2,200 5.5-mile hike from Springer Mountain, Georgia, all the way up to
Did you do it?
northern Maine. Well, I prepared for that hike during the entire time I was going out with Elizabeth. And then she knew I was going to leave for 5.5 months. So I reduced my entire life down to a backpack, got rid of everything I owned, except for my car, which I gave to her to drive until I came back. And she actually dropped me off in Springer Mountain, Georgia on the Appalachian Trail. And I was committed. I was going. And I hiked 8 days. I did just over 100 miles to the Georgia-North Carolina border. And then I hitchhiked like 3 or 4 miles into town, into a little town right there on the border called Hiawassee. And I got myself a hotel room, and I sat in that hotel room thinking for 2 days, what do I want to do? I'd spent 2 years saving money for this trip so that I could pay for myself to do this hike. I had people that were going to do mail drops to me along the way, drop me new pairs of boots because I knew mine would wear out, and like everything along the way. Total support system. I wasn't married. I had no mortgage. I had no career started. It was the perfect time. And after 8 days, I realized a couple things. I realized that I really only had 3 options in my life. Number one was I could continue this hike all the way to Maine, and I could miss Elizabeth the entire time I was gone because I never planned on meeting her before I went up there.
How long were you guys together before you?
About a year and 2 months.
Okay, significant amount of time. I mean,
So
you
we've
pretty
been
much
dating,
know if you're going to choose someone for the rest of their life after 6 months. If you don't know by then.
And Elizabeth and I, we were very serious because she came package deal with 2 young children. It's not like you casually date someone who's a mom,
Right.
Right. I took this very seriously. If I'm going to be in these children's lives, and I had known them at that point for about 6 months. We waited 6 months before I was introduced to the kids.
Okay.
Because both
Smart
of us wanted to
lady.
be careful.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to fall in love with kids that, I was going to all of a sudden disappear from the scene, and I didn't, obviously she wanted to be careful as her mom. We're a year and 2 months into this. I've known the kids for, 8 months now, and she and I have been dating for quite some time. And it's a much longer story. I mean, I asked her out when she was 17 and I was 20, and I was a DJ on a cruise ship. And and we went out on one date, and then she left and got married and moved out of town and had 2 children and moved back and was celebrating her divorce and walked into the nightclub that I was DJing at. And I like to say, it took me 5 years to get a second date, but that's basically how it worked out. And so now I'm hiking the trail, and I realize everyone that's around me, because a lot of people attempt a through hike every year. Thousands of people attempt it, only a few make it. But all the people around me were looking for something in their lives. They had, they didn't know what their next career would be, or their wife had just divorced them, or
You're just talking to people along the trail.
Right. I'm meeting people because we're getting together and kind of camping in the same areas every night. Everybody's kind of, it's funny. They say the Appalachian Trail is one community that is 2,200 miles long and 12 inches wide. Wow. And it's true. You run across the same people. They overtake you, you overtake them. You camp in the same spot at night. You meet people. Everyone was out there looking for something, but I wasn't looking for anything. I got out there and I stretched myself and I did some long days. And
were you not, though? Were you not looking for something?
I wasn't. I was looking to experience the beauty of nature and the isolation that I love so much about long distance backpacking.
Okay.
I think it is incredibly refreshing to the soul to be in that environment, in the perfection of nature, surrounded by pure wilderness. When your day is reduced to, I eat when I'm hungry, I sleep when I'm tired, and I walk when I have energy, and you don't have a watch, you don't have a cell phone, you've got nothing, your life is reduced to that. It also means that you keep your own counsel because no one else is there to whisper in your ear. You are just talking to yourself the whole time. When you reduce your life to that, you usually come back from it with an immense amount of clarity when things have maybe been confusing up until then. I've seen entrepreneurs go on wilderness hikes like that and then come back and know exactly what they want to do with their business, exactly what they want to do with their lives. There's an immense amount of clarity there. So I went out, I hiked for 8 days, and I had clarity. And I went and I sat in a hotel room for 2 days making sure that I was correct about my clarity. I could hike for 5 months and I could miss Elizabeth the entire time. I could hike for 5 months and I could blunt my feelings for Elizabeth and do my best to suppress them and push them down. But if that ever happened and I returned, nothing would ever be the same between us again. That was it. Or I could turn around and go back. And so I called her on the phone and I said, I'm coming home. And she was right in the middle of college finals. And she said, don't mess with me, Cory. She knew. I've been preparing for this for years. She knew. I said, no, really, I'm coming home. And I've written in a journal every day, and that'll explain to you why I'm coming home. But I'm coming home. And she left her finals, dropped out. Teacher wouldn't forgive her for walking out of class and giving up her finals. And she drove all the way to Hiawassee, Georgia, straight to pick me up because she was so excited about me coming back.
Wow.
And 3 weeks later, I spent 2 years of saved money on a ring, and we were married shortly after.
You weren't looking for clarity, but you got it.
I got it while I was out there.
So what was the clarity? What was the...
The clarity was that there was absolutely no adventure that I was going to be able to take myself on alone in the mountains that was going to be bigger and more rewarding than the adventure that was waiting for me right here in Tampa, Florida. And so I came back and went on that adventure instead. And it led to me adopting her 2 children and them becoming Bergerons, and then us having 2 children on top of that. And now we've been married for 24 years and we are loaded with incredible memories and we have amazing relationships with all of our kids. My kids, I'm their best friend. They would rather spend time with me than anyone else. Do you know how amazing that feels to be their dad and have that be the case? And my wife and I, gosh, we have been through hard stuff. But on the other side of it, we are more in love. We are more complementary to each other. We are more respectful than we've ever been, ever in our lives. It gets better every day. We are best friends and we can't wait to spend time together. There's no one that comes to us and says, hey, do you want to go out with me tonight? That is better than spending time with my wife. And honestly, my wife and I don't do anything that the other person is not automatically invited. Like if my wife isn't invited to be there, then I'm not going.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
That's the same with me. So. I've got a very similar relationship with Kelly. And so I used to bus tables when I was in college. And she wasn't my girlfriend yet. I just wanted to talk to her. She was a classmate. And what I would do is I was the self-proclaimed fastest busboy in the state of Missouri. And I would hate it when another busboy or bus gal wouldn't show up. Yep. Because that means I had to do everything faster because all I wanted to do was get back to my college dorm and because we didn't have cell phones back then.
Yep.
In time to be able to call her so that it wasn't socially acceptable, to be too late. So if it was 11 o'clock, you don't really call a girl at 11 o'clock. I mean, out of respect. In the Midwest, that's the way I was raised. So, if it was 10 o'clock, I could call her and talk for an hour or something like that. And that's all that I wanted to do. I just wanted to get back to my room and talk to her. And my roommate was a really precious dude. He was the quintessential college roommate that I'll be telling stories about for the rest of my life.
Of course.
But whenever I would talk to her, he knew how deeply I felt about her. And I knew I couldn't share the same feelings that I had with her because I knew she would be scared off by them. And so I would just talk to her and I would hang up the phone and I had all of these feelings for her, but I had to keep them hidden from her. And every time I would get off the phone, he would just kind of pat me on the back because he knew what I was going through. I just wanted to talk to her. I just wanted to be around her.
Yeah.
And that feeling has never changed.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I know what you mean
know what I'm talking about.
when you have those decisions. I mean, I had the great privilege to be given the opportunity to go to a conservatory called the National Theater Institute, which was very hard to get into. And it's at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in Connecticut. And I had this opportunity to go and perform and be taught by the greatest acting professors, of the day.
Wow.
We got...
I had no idea. This is awesome.
Oh yeah, we actually got trained by soap opera directors that were actually directors on Days of Our Lives. We traveled to Stratford upon Avon and studied with the Royal Shakespeare Company.
Oh my gosh.
I actually got a personal Royal Shakespeare Academy member who looked at me, he gave me a monologue, and then we worked that monologue with him.
Wow.
Along with the Restoration Comedy monologue and also a contemporary monologue. And we did all of those things, and I was miserable the entire time.
No kidding.
Yeah, because I had fallen deeply in love with Kelly at that point in time. And I missed the opportunity to be present because I just wanted to be with her.
Yep.
So now I know that muscle has strengthened some. So now I'm able to come here, without her. Yep. But the best quarter I had was the one where she was here.
Yeah.
But we have responsibilities together.
Sure.
So we're still together because she's at home, with the kids and doing those things. I know you know what it's like.
I do. And those roles were reversed for me for a little while because, as you know, my wife is a professional singer, has been for a very long time. And there was a chapter of our lives where I was a national television director. This is before I went around the other side of the camera and became talent. I was a national television director. And I'd had a lot of success in my career, and Elizabeth came to me. She had been flying back and forth to Nashville every 2 weeks recording in the studio, and her producer said, look, I've got a ton of work for you, a ton of studio work, but I can't keep telling people you're out of town. You have to live here if you want it. So she came to me and said, Cory, listen, you've had a chance to do your career. You can get back to it at some point, but I would love a chance to pursue what I want to do. Now, at this point, we just had a child. Our youngest child was 2 months old. And she said, would you be willing to become a stay-at-home dad with these kids while I pursue my dream? And so we talked about it for about 30 days. We came to the decision to do that. And so when my youngest Aiden was 4 months old, we sold our house here in North Tampa, packed up a truck. In the middle of winter, we moved up to Nashville, Tennessee, into a town where I knew nobody. Down here, full support system of friends, grandparents, everything, right? Up in Nashville, nobody.
Single dad, doesn't know anybody.
Moved into a townhouse, sight unseen, and I took over raising a 4-month-old, a 1.5-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And because I'm an overachiever and extremely driven, I felt I needed to homeschool the older children. So I tried to do that simultaneously. Oh my gosh, my wife was my hero. I would go 2 days without changing out of my pajamas because I couldn't even find time for personal hygiene. I was taking care of these kids. And I would feel like everything was just completely exploding in our house. Everything was out of control. The kids are running wild. The place is a mess. I can't get anybody to do anything that I'm asking them to do. Like the baby's got a messy diaper and is screaming, and my son Ethan is climbing on the staircase, and if he falls, he's going to kill himself. And I'm trying to stay in charge of all. And my wife would come through the door after being out networking during the day with other producers and record labels and stuff like that, and she'd come through the door. And in 10 minutes, she'd have our whole house running like a well-oiled machine. I would collapse on the couch. I'm like, I have no idea how you just did that, but thank God you're home.
Were you having to work at that time also, or were you completely dedicated to?
I was completely dedicated to the children. Now, I started freelancing again about a year and a half later. So I was full-time stay-at-home dad with 4 kids for about a year and a half, and then I stepped back into television production because I missed it and I was really good at it. So I started directing television again. I started doing camera work. I started traveling as a producer and a director for large conventions. I was working for several different production companies out of New York, and we were doing, we were doing shows for anywhere from 500 to 5,000 people at a time, everywhere from Boston all the way to Hawaii, producing large conferences and sales conventions and events for people like Motorola and Walmart and Dunkin' Donuts and big pharmaceutical companies, and that was a really cool experience that fed me for that time, allowing me to get I would leave home for like 3 days and go out and do this big event, and then I come back.
Would somebody deliver the script to you, and then you would have to shoot the script, or were you on the creative side of it as well, or were you just following a blueprint?
So the blueprint had already been hammered out well in advance. Okay. I was there to run the production side of things. Okay. So everything from 60-foot projection screens in front of 5,000 people with line array audio systems and cameras with lenses this long that are half a football field away, picking up speakers on stage, and like setting up all of that and running it like a well-oiled machine. That was what I did. And I was able to step into that role because I had such a strong background in national television directing. So it allowed me to go into a live environment. And
was this before the infomercial career?
Yeah, so interesting. So the national television network that I worked for was Television Retail. Now, I did do a little bit of infomercial, but infomercial is almost its own beast. That is a pre-recorded, 15-minute, 30-minute, or 60-minute commercial where they basically take you in, they introduce you to a product, they give you the 3 top features as to why that product is something that you absolutely can't live without, and then they stack on top of that a whole bunch of rapid fire testimonials that tell you, if you're not on this bandwagon, then you're missing out because all these other people have, their lives have been transformed by having this product, so you should too. And then they take you into a close and they close you on the product, and then they recycle and do it all over again like every 10 minutes.
And then there's the call center somewhere taking calls.
And call center taking calls. Now this is before people were ordering online,
Yeah.
That's an infomercial. And I've done a couple dozen infomercials as the primary talent in my life. But my real bread and butter was completely unscripted television retail, HSN and QVC. And I was hired by 350 different brands to be the face of their brand on television in the US. And
so hang on. So they would put you on camera, give you the product, and then say, go.
Yes, but they handed you the product weeks in advance.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. So I got to use every product in my own home, around my own family, and then I invented every demonstration that was going to be used for that product. I hired the people to set up those demonstrations for me. In some cases, I set up the demonstrations personally because I knew that they were nuanced and they had to be done just right. The most expensive thing any television retail network pays for is their satellite time. It is incredibly pricey. And success on the air on any of those stations is measured in thousands of dollars per minute. So if you're making $1,000 a minute, chances are you'll get one airing and no one will ever see that product again because it never made enough to be viable. If you're making $5,000 a minute, okay, now that's worth giving that product repeat airings. And I'm only speaking about one network because actually there's a smaller network and one that's 3 times the size. And they both have different parameters as far as thousands per minute. But I'm giving you some minimums here just so you understand. So $5,000 per minute, now it's a viable product. Now they will give you repeat airings. Gotcha. If you're up to like $10,000 a minute, now you're going to get prime time.
Wow.
You're going to get 7 p.m. to midnight on weekdays or Saturday mornings. That's when the most people are watching, when those networks are making the most money. And
that's when my wife's mom was on, pretty much buying all of it. Evidently, because she had
probably sold her something.
I'm sure you did. Was there ever products that just, clearly there were products that just didn't make it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Give me an idea, like what products would make it and what wouldn't?
So it's funny that you would say that. I get a lot of people who ask me, have you ever sold anything that you didn't like? And yes, I did. But what I learned was that I can't possibly predict what somebody else likes.
Right.
I sold one time the most useless artificial plant that had LED lights woven through it. There was no way you could take this plant and bend the leaves and form it to look full and look like a real plant. It just looks like scraggly twigs with
Charlie
like
Brown.
10 leaves on it. Right, Charlie Brown's Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And it had like maybe 5 LED lights on it. And it was battery powered, and the batteries wouldn't even last very long. It was just, to me, it was just, I would never buy this in a million years. This is a waste of money, right? And I thought if the dollar store had this, I don't think I would take it off the shelves, and we're selling it for $40. Like, there's no way. Not only did it fly off the shelves, but people then went to the .com for that network and gave it 5-star reviews over and over. We sold it out. People asked for more inventory. I'd be on the air and people would be calling in, giving testimonials on how this was the best thing since sliced bread. And I wouldn't have given this away to somebody because I thought I would be plaguing them with, something awful. So I learned that I can't possibly predict what somebody else is going to love. The advantage of working for a large network like that was that they had a 30-day unconditional money-back guarantee. If you got it home and you didn't like it, they even gave you the return label and the tape to reseal the box. They said, send it back to us. We'll pay for everything. We'll put every dime back in your shorts. So having that, that kind of quality assurance backing me up on the air, I knew that I could sell things based upon their strengths. Not upon what was questionable about them, but what was great about them. Because I could sell you a $600 Dyson, or I could sell you a $200 Hoover, and there are things a $200 Hoover could do that the Dyson could not do, right?
Right.
I mean, I could sell you a Ferrari, but if trunk space is important to you, it's probably not the best car, right? I could give you a Buick and you'd be a lot happier.
Yeah.
So it just depends upon what the strengths of a product are. And so I learned to position products by their strengths. And then people would do their research and go online and figure out if this was for them. And if they bought it and it wasn't, they could send it back and every dime would be put right back in their pocket. So with that kind of backup, I felt good about it.
It seems like the similar formula for digital marketing too, right now. You've got a product that you do not know if it's going to sell or not. And you've got, you don't know who's going to really buy it.
Yep.
And you've got some features that seem to work, and then you've got earlier you described it as positioning the product, talking about all the strengths and benefits of it, testimonials, and then some kind of, taking the risk off the table for the buyer, right? So it seems like the sales process hasn't really changed, but the format in which we do it has.
It absolutely has. And actually, it says that in my book. So my book is called Thousands Per Minute. The Art of Pitching Products on Camera.
That's awesome.
I wrote it back when I was on the air all the time. So I was literally writing that book at the same time that I was building my own video production company, at the same time that I was traveling and speaking on stage, doing keynotes, at the same time that I was on the air anywhere between 60 and 70 airings a month, and sometimes living in a green room for days at a time. My family would bring meals to me and feed me because I didn't even have time to leave the studio to go eat.
Wow.
I was sleeping on couches between airings.
Kind of when you were working with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank on that, and he's seems like he does a lot of product marketing now still. And
well, that's his thing.
Okay.
Kevin understands intimately how to look at a product and with 10 to 15 questions know whether that product will make it or not.
Wow.
And if it will make it, then Kevin has all of the relationships and resources to leverage in order to make that product a huge success.
Wow.
Now, Kevin and I, we'd run in the same circles for quite some time. I was actually the first infomercial I ever hosted. It was one of his infomercials. He's the inventor of the infomercial. He came out with the first one in 1980. It was the Ginsu knife. Everybody knows the Ginsu knife if you know infomercials.
Yeah.
And then every other big name since then, you name it. Jack LaLanne, George Foreman, Billy Mays. Like, he discovered all those guys.
Wow.
They were his products. So when I built my video production company, I was looking for a partner with a huge network that I could leverage their relationships in order to draw business into my company to help really launch it in a big way. Kevin and I, we already knew each other from television retail, and he'd seen me as I was growing my business enter some pitch competitions, and I always took first place.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of an unfair advantage. I had tens of thousands of hours on camera practicing.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't hard to win a pitch competition.
Yeah.
So Kevin came in and he was actually missing a video production component to his product success machine, where he takes products that are unheard of and he takes them to market and makes them huge successes. He needed a content production partner right at the time I was launching my business, and it made sense. So we did a deal and he became my partner for 7 years.
Awesome.
Until I sold that company in March of 2021.
Back when I was just getting signed up for BA and we were doing kind of our initial interview, and you were like, okay, so now we're going to populate your page here.
Yeah.
And I've had regional success in private. That's the way I would describe myself. So what I did is, my dad is a electrical repairman. He's retired now. My mom was the executive secretary for the chairman of pediatrics at Washington University. So, an executive secretary. What they taught me was to work and work hard and work overtime if you need more money.
Yep. Sounds like my father. He was a bricklayer and a pastor. So hard work, earn your money. At the end of the day, you better be exhausted and starving because you've earned your dinner and you've earned your bed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started my real estate career right around 2008 in the worst real estate market in history. So the only thing I knew how to do was put my head down and work. Yeah. And I am psychologically unemployable, right? I cannot be employed by anybody. So what I did was I just worked. And in 6 years' time, had accidentally built the largest vacation rental focused brokerage in the nation. We had gone from 6 million to 256 million in about 4.5 years.
Whoops.
And I didn't even realize it. By the time I looked up and somebody told me, hey, Jeremy, this is what you've done, I was like, wow, now it's time to scale this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I got to the point where I needed to put myself in a new environment with people who were smarter than me, a peer group at another level, which is how I ended up at BA. But I'll never forget, I'm populating the thing and you're like, all right, Jeremy, so let's talk about some of your accomplishments. So, what have you done? And I'm like, well, I sold a lot of real estate. I wrote a book, and I'm like trying to think of things that I did. And you're like, Jeremy, everybody here has written a book. Everybody's here sold a lot of stuff. Like, what have you done? And I'm like, that's a great question. What have I done? And so it was fascinating to me, and that's I think where my imposter syndrome sort of started a little bit, because I'm like, wow, because I joined BA in an effort to help Yakov Smirnov get his real estate development funded.
Yeah.
I showed up in an act of service to help him. And then when, he paused on that for a minute, I still had a membership to BA, and I'm like, okay, I better start learning fast. But I've always learned fast.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have too. And one of the things that I want to share with everybody here, I want to go back to your relationship, because there are some powerful things here. I would have done all of these listeners a disservice if they couldn't hear this story about you and Elizabeth and your passion for your son and all of this happening right during COVID.
Yeah, you're bringing this up, and I'm getting teary in the eyes, because this is very, very close to my heart.
Do you want to tell the story?
Sure, I would be happy to tell the story. So I have 4 children. My oldest child, Dominic, suffered from very, very bad anxiety in his mid-teens. And at that time, I didn't know what to do about it. I mean, I remember it being 2:00 in the morning and him being in the fetal position, sobbing on my bedroom floor and having no idea how to help him. And so we walked the path of traditional medicine. We went to neurologists and psychiatrists, and Dominic ended up on a cocktail of medications. He had 9 different medications in his body every single day, and one to help regulate his moods, and one to help him with compulsive behavior, and then that one would ramp him up too much, so one to settle him down, then another one to help him go to sleep at night because he had insomnia and he'd be awake 3 to 5 days at a time, and then that was so powerful he couldn't wake up in the morning, so you had to arouse him enough that he could take another pill just to get him out of bed in the morning, and there was weight gain as a result of this, and it was just, oh my gosh, he was a teenager with all of this medication in his body, and it was just horrific. Well, Dominic actually ended up when he moved out of the house, he moved to California, and then he moved from California back home for a very short time, and then moved to Washington State. And it was in Washington State when he was of legal age that he began using medical cannabis. And in doing that, he came off 9 different medications and had what you and I would consider a normal life after about 6 months. And at that time, he was actually like taking oil in capsules. You wouldn't even know it was in his body, but he was taking just a little bit, like 3 times a day. And he had an appetite and started eating again. His weight gain stopped. He had energy and he was exercising. He began attending college. He was the youngest person ever voted onto the Greek Council. He was voted county treasurer. He started his own political consulting firm, helping somebody get elected to state government. I mean, all of this happened within 6 months after him getting on medical cannabis. Well, we saw the impact of a natural homeopathic approach to his healing that doctors and medication was not able to provide. When Dominic finally got on the other side of this, we think, oh, thank goodness, we have 3 other children, but no one else has suffered from this kind of thing like Dominic has. Well, my youngest child, Aiden, ended up with the same thing happening to him at age 12. And it was at that point that it clicked for us. This is happening when puberty sets in, because hormones start going crazy in the body. And if you have a predisposition to general anxiety, then it just spikes during these years due to hormone changes. That's the best we could come up with. And it has been verified since then by other professionals that are smarter than me. Anyway, when this happened to Aiden, we knew we didn't want to take the traditional medical approach that we had taken with Dominic, because it almost destroyed Dominic. Dominic was in and out of the hospital throughout his teens. I mean, just episodes. He was, taken to the hospital in ambulances after dropping unconscious, and no one could wake him up for 2 days because his body had been awake for 5 or 6 days, and it finally just quit on him and couldn't be woken up. And we didn't want to see that happen to Aiden. We tried everything. I mean, you name it. Biofeedback therapy, neurofeedback therapy, breathing techniques, nutritional counseling, special massage. I mean, Aiden got to the point where his stomach had contracted up inside his rib cage, and we had to get him massage that would massage the stomach back down so he could eat, because he couldn't even swallow water without throwing it back up again.
Like a hiatal hernia, sort of?
Yeah, like his stomach in a knot and right up inside his diaphragm and unable to loosen. We were trying, nutritional supplements and oils and I mean, you name it, and we did it.
You built a sensory deprivation tank. So.
We did. We found out he got great results from being in a separate sensory deprivation float tank. If you're unfamiliar, one of those float tanks is it's water that's about 9 inches deep, about the size of your body. It's about 4 feet wide and about 7 feet long, and it's the water is heated to exactly 98.6 degrees.
And salinated too.
And 1,200 pounds of Epsom salts in it, so that your body will float on top of the water. And then it is sealed, so it is soundproof, and it is completely dark inside. It takes away the sense of touch and feeling. It takes away hearing. It takes away sight. It takes away smell. It takes away everything other than just being inside your own mind. And people have used it for very deep meditation and, various other things, but it is extremely calming. The problem is, as effective as it was, and yes, I did. I installed a shed in my backyard. I soundproofed it. I drove to Tennessee. I bought a float tank. I brought it back to Florida. I ran electric. I installed the whole thing in my backyard. I had a sensory deprivation soundproof float tank in my backyard for Aiden, but he couldn't spend his life floating in a tank, and it only worked for a few hours, and then he needed to go back in the tank again,
right.
So he got to the point where he lost 30 pounds in 30 days. My son went from 120 pounds to 90 pounds as a 15-year-old teenager. And we thought, we didn't know what to do. We thought that, he was dying. Like, what could we do? And so Elizabeth booked an Airbnb on a very remote part of Costa Rica. And she did this because she did research and found out that there are, National Geographic did a study and established what are called blue zones in the world. And there are 5 blue zones. There's like an island somewhere off of Spain. There's a place in Okinawa. There's various places. And one of them is the Nicoya Peninsula of northern Costa Rica on the Pacific side. And blue zones are places where people are living an extraordinarily high quality of life to well over 100 years old. And they're looking at the culture and the diet and what causes people to live this long. Well, they established 5 blue zones. Costa Rica was one of them, one of the healthiest places on earth. Elizabeth took Aiden there. And there was something about that environment that completely shifted Aiden's reality. Aiden had separation anxiety from Elizabeth toward the end. Separation anxiety so bad that I remember one point in time where Aiden was upstairs and he was confident that his mom was at the bottom of the stairs. Well, Elizabeth had gone to the bathroom and found out we didn't have any toilet paper left. So she decided to take 10 minutes thinking nobody would miss her and run next door to the gas station and just get like a 2-roll pack of toilet paper and bring it back to the house. And I heard Aiden's voice go, "Mom." And then I heard panic in his voice when there wasn't an answer. "Mom!" And he came running down the stairs. By the time I got to Aiden, he had made it out through the screen door onto our back deck, looked over at the driveway, saw Mom's car missing, and he was flat on his back, hyperventilating, sweating out of every pore in his body, vision blurring, hands and feet going numb, mumbling, almost unable to speak. I put my hand on his neck. His pulse was like over 180, full-blown hospitalization, panic attack.
Yeah.
And this, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's call that a 9, 10 being, your heart stopped.
Mm-hmm.
He would have a 9 3 times a week, and he would be hovering between a 5 and a 6, just barely able to be in his own skin every other moment. When he went to Costa Rica, he came down to about a 2 within 48 hours and was able to walk the beaches alone, by himself, go surfing by himself, be apart from Elizabeth. He was calm. He started eating again. He started gaining weight. It was like a miracle happened to him.
God. What do you attribute all that to?
So Costa Rica has a saying which has turned into kind of a tourist saying. People get it on their license plates and on baseball hats and stuff. It's pura vida, which means pure life in Spanish. The Costa Ricans, sure, it's all over the place on t-shirts, but the native people who are there, it's more than that to them. There is a respect for the land. There is a respect for nature and its beauty. There is a respect for spirituality. There is a different way that people eat down there. I mean, sure, you can get garbage to eat if you want. You can eat, crap food. But quite honestly, the most readily available and the most inexpensive food there is all really fresh stuff that somebody pulled right out of the ground that day. Fish out of the oceans, vegetables and fruit. I mean, people by the roadside lopping the top off coconuts that they've had on ice and just handing it to you, and you drinking fresh coconut water out of the coconuts. People prioritize their days different. They handle their relationships different. Everything in that environment was extremely emotionally and physically nurturing for Aiden in a way that we could not replicate in the United States. So they went down there for 2 weeks. They went down there for a month the first time, stayed for a month, came home just before Christmas. This is 2019.
And we know what's about to happen.
Yeah. And they were home for 2 weeks. When Aiden came home, he was healthy, and I thought, silver bullet, it's happened. Aiden's fixed. Great. Now we can move on with our lives.
Yes.
Within 2 weeks of being back here in the United States, he went right off a cliff again.
Really?
Right off a cliff.
I didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah. And it was at that point that I turned to Elizabeth and I said, and at this point, I had a very rapidly growing video production company and digital marketing agency, one of the largest in my area. We were going to 2x, maybe even 3x in the next year. We had spent 3 years on a business plan building our company to the point of launch in early 2020 when we were going to go to the moon. And every indication said we had already crushed every benchmark we had for ourselves. Along the way, my investors were jumping out of their pants excited. They couldn't believe what had happened. Their return was huge. They were so excited. And this was late 2019. And Elizabeth and I just had to make the decision. We're like, look, just because we built a business here does not mean we can tell our son that we're going to take away his best chance at life.
Right.
So we packed 10 suitcases with 70 pounds, because that's as much as the airlines would allow, and moved her and Aiden to Costa Rica with the idea that every 6 weeks they would come visit me, and every 6 weeks in between I would visit them, and we'd only be apart for 3 weeks at a time.
What a crazy moment in your life where this is the best case scenario for you.
Oh yeah.
You know, you have to be away from your wife. You're splitting up your family, right?
Yep.
And you told me at one point that you had spent almost all of your money on all of these different.
I emptied the coffers.
Yeah.
Emptied the coffers. You know, we not only had our own savings and some smaller investments, but I had put a ton of seed money into the business, and the business owed me a ton of money. And in order to save my son, I emptied everything, including whatever the business owed me. I pulled it right out of the business and just used it. I mean, there were times that I was paying up to $10,000 a month for homeopathic treatments to try and help him. And you know, this went on for 2 years. You know, it was rough. We just drained everything, and we got to the point where now my 2 older children were out of the house already. They had moved on with their lives. My daughter was married. My son Dominic was living in Washington. My 2 younger boys, Ethan was, you know, spending most of his time. I mean, he's out of high school. He's spending most of his time hanging out with his friends. He still lived at home, but I didn't see him very often, you know, like every couple of days.
Sure.
And quite honestly, we'd converted the garage, which was a detached garage from the house. We converted it into a whole apartment. He lived out there anyway, you know. So I'm in this big old historic home that I've spent years renovating for a family, and it's me and the Labrador. And that's it. And the Labrador is 17 years old, you know.
Oh no.
So they moved to Costa Rica, and they lived there. They ended up living there for about 7 months after that point. And of course, in the middle of that, COVID dropped. All the borders got locked down. They couldn't leave the country. I couldn't get to them. They couldn't get to me. And that was it. There was nothing we could do. I was on the phone.
That whole
with the US.
6-week idea that you had just kind of went out the window.
It went up in smoke.
Not to mention the fact that your business got shut down.
Yep.
And so there went your income, and you know, you've got investors, and you've got, now you have no income, and you're separated from your wife.
Yep.
I was separated from my wife once. She had to go to Springfield, Missouri for a final, which I encouraged her not to go to, and got snowed in while she was up there. She was like, hey, there's going to be some snow, and I've got to go take this final. I was like, it's going to get snowed out. She went there, it got snowed in. We were apart from each other for 1 day, and I'm like writing poetry and singing songs and stuff. And here you are, separated, you know, in this situation. Cory, I know what it felt like for 1 day.
Yeah.
The resilience that you have, you know, is amazing to me.
I thank God for creating Apple that created FaceTime, because man, we video conferenced hours, you know, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It was really something. And I was on the phone with the U.S. consulate 2 or 3 times a week, trying to get them out of the country, trying to get them back on U.S. soil, because I didn't know how long COVID would last, and it was completely unpredictable. And you're right, the business itself, you know, I went from a guy who was working 40 to 50 hours a week to a guy that maybe if I tried really hard, I could find an hour's worth of stuff to do every day on my laptop. Outside of that, I mean, my whole studio, I had a 6,500 square foot studio, custom built out with corporate offices and editing suites. And I had a full-time staff of 10, and I had 40 to 50 contractors I was using on a weekly basis. And we were shooting all over the place, and production vehicles going on location all over the Tampa Bay area and shooting. Everyone was laid off except for my marketing director. And the only reason he was still working was because we had 2 contracts with people who had not yet pulled the plug like everyone else had. And he was still fulfilling on those. So I kept him on payroll. But outside of that, I mean, I went, my business in May of 2020, my business went, I think I made like just over $8,000 that month in May. It was, I mean, the first year I was in business, I made more than that.
Right,
you know?
right. No doubt.
My first month, it was very difficult. And because I was a non-essential business, my studios were closed. I wasn't even allowed to go there. I went there at one point just to check in and make sure all of our, like, you know, we have $1 million worth of equipment there. I'm just making sure it's okay. And the cop caught me in the parking lot, gave me 5 minutes to check on my business, and then kicked me out of my own office. For 2 weeks, there was mandatory lockdown in my town, I wasn't allowed to leave my property unless I was getting gas or groceries. Those are the only two reasons I could go. And there were only, I think, 2 days a week that I was allowed to do that. Other than that, I had to be at home. Nobody could get together in groups of more than 6 by law. So I certainly couldn't put together a video production,
No doubt.
It was a time for a lot of thinking. I learned to walk the slack line during that time. I bought a slack line. Amazon was still delivering, so I had one delivered to my house, and I stretched it between 2 trees in my backyard, and I learned to
focus and like balance. And...
Yeah, it was
Wow.
really awesome.
Wow.
I can't do it nearly as good now as I could do it in 2020.
I learned to smoke meat in that time.
Did you?
Yeah, it's like I learned to make ribs and
Right.
briskets and things like that. So, Kelly and I, at one point in our lives, she was running a cleaning business for short-term rentals. When I first got into the short-term rental world, I was selling quite a few of them. And then the first thing that people need on their power team when they get a short-term rental is someone to clean the property.
Yeah.
Kelly was at home raising kids, and we needed the money. We needed about an extra $1,000 a month, for groceries and gas and that sort of a thing. And so I would quickly just volunteer her, to clean properties. And she did a great job. And within a year, she had 80 accounts, and was making so many accounts that she was always cash poor because she wasn't making enough money yet from the net 60, like on her billing, to pay the payroll on what she owed. So we were always poor, even though her business was growing. It was growing that fast. And so she got to the point where, and she also had 3 kids at home.
Oh my
And but we needed that $1,000 a month.
Yep.
And so she worked her butt off and worked herself into the point where she almost had a nervous breakdown. And
that's a tough racket.
It is. And imagine raising the kids that you had at home with all of that going on, and having a cleaning business on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
That was Kelly, and she got to the point where, through multiple conversations of me saying, yeah, just stick it out, was just to the point where she couldn't work another day. And so we had to transition those accounts to somebody else. And we had to sell an investment property I had gone into business with my grandparents. They had given us equity in one of the properties that actually Grandpa bought it, but because I had found the property and was managing the property, and he gave me some equity in the property.
Yep.
Well, we had to encourage Grandpa to sell the property that time, and I took my money out of that property and just lived off of it. So Kelly could, stay at home with the kids. For longest time, I had this philosophy that I had spent the money. I had spent the money. I told the story in such a way that, I had to spend the money on, life.
Right.
But someone corrected me, and they said, no, you invested that money in your family.
That's right.
And so I see that in your case too. I see that you've invested a tremendous amount of money in your family, and there's a return on that, and it may not even be in your lifetime. Think about that.
Yeah.
That return might be you have probably broken some kind of generational curse because you've equipped your family with the tools to be able to beat it, because you and Elizabeth had the brain power and the strength and passion to be protectors for your family.
Thank you for that. I've never heard anybody phrase it that way, and it's incredibly insightful. I'll carry that with me. Thank you.
You bet. And so I think let's finish with this, because I think you are uniquely equipped to help other people have that kind of strength and passion in their life, and that passion for beautiful places. And so originally you had wanted to create a development in Costa Rica, and that dream is not dead for me. We're going to do that. I'm calling it into existence.
It would be an amazing thing.
We're going to own property in Costa Rica together.
I'm all about
our
it.
family.
I'm out of whiskey, but I would.
Let's cheers anyway.
Yeah, well, cheers anyway.
Might be a little bit easier to do a development in Montana, and you started that. So let's just talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
I don't want to keep people too long. This has been a wild ride for them, but I really want to talk about what's going on in Montana, and how you're going to bring some of the most beautiful opportunities, to people so that they can live on a mountaintop with views of Glacier National Park.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff.
The opportunity.
So let me just offer a little bit of context here real quick. I told the story of Aiden and Elizabeth in Costa Rica. The part of it that we did not tell is the fact that I actually sold everything that we own when it got to the point where I knew that I was no longer going to accept that I was apart from my wife and child for an unpredictable amount of time. It could have lasted forever and or another week. I didn't know. But I decided that was the end of it. So I actually bought an old 27-year-old Jeep Wrangler. I bought it because my research told me that in Central and South America, that particular model of Jeep, there were a lot of parts available for it. So if it broke down, I'd be okay. I spent 3 months reconditioning it. I spent 3 months selling everything that we own. I liquidated my entire life, the house, all the furniture in it, every tool that I had that I'd used to build over my lifetime, everything, you name it. I gave stuff to local thrift stores and Salvation Army. They couldn't even believe I was handing to them just to get it out of my life. And I reduced everything down to what would fit in the back of that 27-year-old Jeep Wrangler. And if you've ever driven a Jeep Wrangler, you know there's very little room in the back. So basically it was my camping tent, my backpack, 3 changes of clothes, my guitar, and some tools to fix the Jeep on the road if I needed to. That was it. That's all I owned. And when I pulled out of my property, knowing that that was all I owned, it was one of the most freeing experiences of my life. And then I could talk.
Well, you were going to do a border run. You were just going to.
I was. So the plan, I had already mapped out 4-wheel trails through the mountains that were going to avoid border crossings, and I was going to make it through Mexico. I was going to make it all the way down through Guatemala and Nicaragua and all the way to Costa Rica. And I was going to make it to my family.
Yeah.
And 1 week before I was going to leave for that trip, I was wrapping up the final details of it. The local police didn't know this, but I was actually living in my video production studio because we had a bedroom set with a bed on it. I was sleeping in that bed. I was living there because I had a shower in the building. I didn't own a home anymore. And I was getting ready to leave on that trip. And the U.S. consulate, after me bugging them for months, called me and said, we've got 2 charter flights to repatriate people back into the U.S., one on Monday and one on Wednesday. About 3 weeks from now, we can get your wife in on Monday. We can get your son out on Wednesday. Take these seats because you probably won't get, another chance. And I did. And I took those seats. And there were no connecting flights. They flew them into Houston. I had to drive from Tampa Bay to Houston to pick them up and bring them back. And when I brought them back, we didn't have any place to live. So we began considering, okay, what was it about Costa Rica that really worked for our son Aiden and helped him with his anxiety? Because we want to continue to multiply that success if we can here in the United States.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we began looking at beautiful natural surroundings, small town feel, slower pace of life, lots of outdoor adventures and activities. We started looking at it and thinking, where can we go in this country that it has that same type? We might not be able to replicate Costa Rica, but how close can we get?
I'm talking about a little place called Aspen, but it's too expensive because the billionaires are pushing out the millionaires.
That's right.
So where else is there?
Where else is there? My mother had moved to Montana many years ago, and we'd been up there a couple times to visit her.
Gorgeous.
And since then, my brothers and sisters had gravitated up there. And so we just decided that's it. Why not go where there's also family, put ourselves within striking distance of them? We know how beautiful Montana is, and we feel that it could meet all of these other things. So we literally made the decision to move there on a Friday, and by Monday we were driving. It took us an hour to pack. We all had what would fit in the back of the Jeep. That was it.
Right.
And we drove 3,000 miles across the country and moved to northwestern Montana, just outside Glacier National Park in the Flathead Valley. What we didn't know when we moved there is that this place was a very well-kept secret among high net worth people for a long time. And it had only really been discovered over the past 3 years since COVID caused people to want to exit urban areas and find beautiful, remote places where they could work from laptops. And this place became the fastest growing county in Montana over the next few months. Over the next few years, which it still is now. It's the fastest growing county in Montana. Anyway, we fell in love with it. And my son's anxiety has virtually disappeared in that place.
Wow.
And we understand the healing impact of having extreme natural beauty, an environment that encourages daily adventure right outside people's front doors. And so that is what we want to put our hearts into, and we want to help bring other people into that environment and help them experience the same kind of healing if they need it, or the same kind of nurturing of your soul that we understand exists in these wild places in our world. We want to do that for people. We have spent 2 years searching for exactly the right property. We've spent, after we found it, we spent almost a year building out the plan for the property. And right now we have 440 acres that we have profiled, that we have done some light platting of, that is in a little town called Lakeside, Montana. The county commissioner calls it the sleeping giant in his particular district. It's about 45 minutes from the western entrance to Glacier National Park, which is called the Alps of the West. It is, or the crown of the continent. It is the most beautiful mountains we have in our country. Lakeside, Montana is about 35 minutes from the number 3 ski resort in the country, which is outside of Whitefish, Montana. It is right on the shores of the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi. It's huge. It is surrounded by mountains that are snow-capped 3/4 of the year. The lake is home to people who are kayaking and cliff jumping and landing, planes on the water and sailing. And we have wild rivers that are loaded with trout, and fly fishermen are all over the place, and kayakers are everywhere. It is an outdoor enthusiast's paradise. Hands down, the most beautiful place in our country, as far as I have seen, and I've been all over our country. We are going to develop 440 acres into 110 lots, all between 2 and 4.5 acres in size. We want each person to have a lot that feels far enough away from their neighbor that they have their own little piece of paradise. And we are on the verge of launching this entire development. We're in the earliest stages right now. So we're still, my wife and I have done, we've done fix and flips, we've done single family rentals, we've been involved in other deals in a small way. But, I was a guy who was born with tools in my hand. I can fix or build anything. The land itself is a medium I have not yet worked with. I've worked with metal, I've worked with wood. I've built everything from beautiful custom furniture right down to, framing houses. But I am genuinely excited about the opportunity to evolve the land into a place that invites community and adventure and natural beauty for the homeowners.
You're already equipped to build communities because it's what you do on a daily basis with BA. And you're naturally equipped to build a community, and it is your legacy. I can't wait to help introduce people to this place and to do anything that I possibly can.
Thank you.
To make this, it's not even a dream, to make this current endeavor succeed. And so if anybody listening to this has an interest in owning a lot in this beautiful place, then connect with us. We'll make sure to get them to you so we can get some lot reservations.
I would absolutely love that. So the stage we're at right now is we are putting the property under contract in about 2 weeks. We already have a letter of intent that is signed by the owner. He's agreed to our terms. We're good to go with the development deal. I have a pre-commitment, although the money has not been put in my account. And I learned from selling a business that you never count on the money until the money's actually there.
Of course.
So we have a pre-commitment for our pre-development funds, what it's going to take for earnest money to get the property under contract, what it's going to take to start, LiDAR mapping, drone mapping of the topography of the property and get the engineering team underway and get the legal in place and that kind of stuff. All of that will probably be taking form within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then after that, yes, I have... our goal is that the property will be fully platted and approved. The county commissioner has already told us that he is going to streamline this operation because he needs big development to happen in his district. Otherwise, it's going to put him in a tax deficit with the state. He must continue to pass updated property taxes on to new property owners. So he wants to get us in there and get it done, and he'll work with planning and zoning to make sure that happens quickly.
That's great.
The goal is to have a pre-plat approval by April and be able to break ground in April, have the engineering done. So over the next 7 months, we'll be doing a raise of somewhere around $8 million is what we'll need to be able to secure the property and get all of the engineering done and initiate excavation. come the spring. Ultimately, it's going to be about a $13.5 million investment, but it is a 2-phase project, and phase 1 completely pays for the entire development of phase 2.
That's great.
So we don't expect to have to hold investor funds more than 24 months. We are right now exploring what is the best structure for the financing that we put in place. Okay. Should we do this as a syndication? Should we do this through private equity? Should we do this? Like, there's just a lot of different ways to do it, and we have not yet landed on this is the way we're going to do it. So,
well, you'll find it. If I know anybody that can do it, it's you. And,
Thank you.
And like I said, if there's any resources that I have that can help you get that done, they're yours.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And hopefully by the time this airs in a few months, we'll put some comments and some links in the show description.
Sure, you got it.
So people can go check it out and possibly even take action at that time.
That'd be amazing. We'd love to take people up there in side-by-sides on spring and say, go put your flag in the ground.
I'll bring mine up and follow you around.
Outstanding. I'll let you drive the side-by-side.
All right. Well, thanks for the interview, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Really
thank you for
good.
having me.
And thank you for sharing your story. I know it was, I don't think that I don't realize how hard it is to relive that. So thank you for sharing it here.
But I'm grateful for it because it transformed who I am in different stages along the way. And I look in the mirror and I'm thankful for who I am.
And there's somebody else out there that's probably listening to this that needs hope. And we've just given them some of that.
Good.
So
good.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, a big thank you for listening to the end of our podcast. I know your time is valuable, and I hope you got a few takeaways that are going to help you get a greater return on that time. I know you will. And if you did enjoy it, I'd sure appreciate a share or a comment. Feel free to subscribe for instant access to new episodes and offers. There's also a ton of free content and ways to learn more and engage more at WorleyRealEstateNetwork.com. Until then, we'll continue to bring you recipes for success and real stories from real people who, like you, are living out your divine purpose. And hey, God loves you. No matter what happens, don't give up.